Hey there, and welcome to Wellness Warrior Wednesdays. I'm Tom, and each week I bring you a little tip, whether it be nutrition, lifestyle, or mindset, on how to kickstart your wellness transformation. This week, I'm going to talk about nutrition. And the reason I'm going to talk about nutrition is a story that I was thinking of as I walked past some taxis with a taxi driver. A couple of weeks ago in Thessaloniki, he was asking me about what I do, being here in Greece, all the way from Australia. And I said, I'm a wellness coach. I said, so what does a wellness coach do? I said, I help people. I blog and I give them tips and do some coaching around lifestyle, nutrition, and mindset on how to improve their health and well-being. And he said, well, I got this problem. I said, so, Yanni. I said, so Yanni, what would the problem be that you've got? He said, Tom, I've got this, 10 or 12 kilos of excess weight around my gut, which funnily enough is where most men carry their excess weight. And I said, okay, Yanni, so, being in the cab, how many hours a day do you drive? So, he said, look, I'm in the cab for about 8 to 10 hours a day, sometimes up to 12. I said, wow, that's a lot of hours in a cab. And so I said, in terms of movement, do you get out much when you're in the cab? And so he said no. I said, well, there's something you could start doing. You could start getting active, as we know from last week's tip, just when you stopped and all that. I said, what about your food, Yanni? I said, I noticed you're drinking a freddo. And a freddo is a cold coffee. Like he was drinking a freddo espresso, I think it was, which is just a cold black, coffee. And it was about 10 or 11 in the morning. And I said, it's 10 or 11 in the morning, getting close to lunchtime. Hey, have you had anything to eat? Or, what else have you had today? And he said, look, I wake up in the morning, I'm usually in a rush to get into the cab. So I have a coffee at home, like a hot coffee, like a Ness, which is just like a Nescafe coffee. And he said, I said, do you eat anything with that? He said, no, don't eat anything with that. And then I said, then what happens? He said, it gets to about 10 o'clock and I start looking for start feeling, like I need something else. So he goes for the freddo. And I said, well, with the freddo, have you eaten anything, or do you eat anything with the freddo? He said, I'll have sometimes I might have a bit of a kuluri. I said, so what's a kuluri? And kuluri is, I knew what a kuluri is, but I'll tell you what a kuluri is. It's just like a round bread roll. And he goes, I just nibble on that kuluri, which is basically just white bread with sesame seeds. They do taste delicious, but I'm not sure how much nutritional value a kuluri has. And then I said, what happens? Yanni, what do you do for the rest of the day? I said, well, I just work till about 6 or 7. And then I get home, he goes about 8 o'clock. And then he goes, then I eat. And I said, oh, cool. What? Good food? He said, oh, yeah, my wife, she cooks beautiful food. No doubt. I said, Yanni. And I said, well, how much food do you eat? He goes, I'm so hungry. He goes, I just fill up my plate 2 times. 3 times sometimes. And I just eat. And I eat a lot of food. And, so I drink a couple of soda waters at the end to digest. And then he goes, then I just feel really bloated, and I lay on the couch, and that's it for the day. And then he goes, same routine every day. So this is not uncommon, like for taxi drivers, but also for people that work in an office or that are in fairly sedentary type roles, people that are busy, they just haven't got time in the morning. And the thing is that he's got it the wrong way around. What I said to Yanni is, Yanni said, your body's storing fat during the day. Said the number one problem is you've got such a big gap between your meals. And your body is, instead of energy, providing it with fuel in the morning because it's combusting and it needs fuel in the morning. I said, you're waiting till nighttime. I said, but by then your body's stored the fat. It's storing it in your gut as a preservation method to keep you from starving. I said, because you're giving it the illusion that you're not eating all day, And he said, oh, so what do you recommend? I said, Yanni, my number one advice, and my number one advice to you guys out there is have a default breakfast and a default lunch, especially if you're busy and on the go. And so the tip of the day is, what's your default? For me, my default breakfast at home is going to be oats. Like I eat a bowl of oats made with milk, and I either put bananas or fresh berries, honey and cinnamon, and that is my default breakfast every day when I'm at home. I'll eat other things when I'm at home, but if I haven't got time, that's what I go for. I go for my oats. If I'm out, my default breakfast is going to be poached eggs on toast with tomato or mushrooms as a side. What's your default breakfast, or what's your default lunch? And if you haven't got one, what would be your default breakfast or your default lunch to help you start fueling your body in the morning and at lunchtime, rather than letting it go hungry through the day and accumulating fat. What are you doing to fuel your body early in the day so you don't have to gorge at night? You can eat a smaller dinner and you can feel better at night. You can sleep lighter and be energized throughout the day rather than juicing up on coffee and sugar and whatever else. What's your default going to be? Post it down here below in the comments. Remember to like the Medi Wellness Warriors page if you haven't already. Share it with your friends. Thank you. Here's to your wellness transformation, and we'll catch you next Wednesday. Thank you.